The history of America begins long before the arrival of European settlers. For thousands of years, the land that would later be called the Americas was home to diverse and complex indigenous civilizations. These societies had rich cultures, advanced agricultural practices, and intricate trade networks that spanned the continents. The story of America is deeply rooted in the lives and histories of these indigenous peoples, whose legacy continues to shape the land and its people. The indigenous peoples of the Americas. Before the arrival of Europeans, the Americas were inhabited by millions of indigenous peoples who had migrated from Asia tens of thousands of years earlier. These early inhabitants spread across the continents, adapting to a wide range of environments, from the frozen Arctic to the dense rainforests of the Amazon. Over time, they developed distinct cultures, languages, and ways of life. In North America, indigenous societies were diverse and varied. In the Northeast, tribes such as the Iroquois and Algonquin lived in settled agricultural communities, growing crops like maize, beans, and squash. The Iroquois Confederacy, a powerful alliance of 6 nations, is often cited as one of the earliest examples of a democratic political system. In the Southeast, the Mississippian culture built large mound complexes, such as Cahokia, which was one of the largest cities in the world at its peak around 1050 CE. In the Southwest, the ancestral Puebloans, also known as the Anasazi, constructed elaborate cliff dwellings and developed sophisticated irrigation systems to farm in arid conditions. The Navajo and Apache peoples, who arrived later, became skilled horsemen and warriors. On the Great Plains, tribes like the Sioux, Cheyenne, and Comanche relied on the buffalo for sustenance, clothing, and shelter, following the herds in a nomadic lifestyle. In Central and South America, advanced civilizations such as the Maya, Aztec, and Inca flourished. The Maya, known for their monumental architecture, mathematics, and astronomy, built cities like Tikal and Chichen Itza. The Aztec Empire, centered in the Valley of Mexico, established the grand city of Tenochtitlan, which was one of the largest cities in the world at the time of European contact. The Inca Empire, stretching along the Andes Mountains, constructed an extensive road network and the iconic city of Machu Picchu. These indigenous societies were not isolated. They engaged in trade, warfare, and cultural exchange across vast distances. However, their world would be forever changed with the arrival of European explorers in the late 15th century. Early European exploration. The first Europeans to reach the Americas were the Norse, led by Leif Erikson, who established a short-lived settlement in present-day Newfoundland, Canada, around 1000 CE. However, this settlement, known as Vinland, was abandoned after a few decades, and the Norse did not establish a lasting presence in the Americas. The more significant wave of European exploration began in the late 15th century, driven by the desire for new trade routes to Asia, the spread of Christianity, and the pursuit of wealth. In 1492, Christopher Columbus, an Italian explorer sailing under the Spanish flag, set out to find a westward route to Asia. Instead, he landed in the Bahamas, marking the beginning of sustained European contact with the Americas. Columbus's voyages sparked a wave of exploration and colonization. Spanish conquistadors such as Hernán Cortés and Francisco Pizarro embarked on expeditions to conquer and plunder the wealthy indigenous empires of the Aztec and Inca. Cortés, with the help of indigenous allies, overthrew the Aztec Empire in 1521, while Pizarro conquered the Inca Empire in 1533. These conquests brought vast wealth to Spain, but also led to the devastation of indigenous populations through warfare, forced labor, and the introduction of European diseases, to which the native peoples had no immunity. Other European powers soon followed. In 1497, John Cabot, an Italian explorer sailing for England, reached the coast of North America, laying the groundwork for future English claims to the continent. French explorers such as Jacques Cartier began exploring the St. Lawrence River in the 1530s, while the Portuguese focused on South America, eventually establishing the colony of Brazil. The impact of European contact. The arrival of Europeans had profound and often devastating effects on indigenous societies. The introduction of diseases such as smallpox, measles, and influenza decimated native populations who had no prior exposure to these illnesses. It is estimated that up to 90% of the indigenous population in some areas died within the first century of European contact. European colonization also disrupted traditional ways of life. Indigenous peoples were often forced off their lands, enslaved, or subjected to harsh labor systems such as the encomienda system in Spanish colonies. The spread of Christianity, often imposed by force, led to the erosion of indigenous spiritual practices and cultural traditions. Despite these challenges, indigenous peoples resisted European domination in various ways. Some formed alliances with European powers to gain an advantage over rival tribes, while others fought fiercely to defend their lands and way of life. The legacy of this resistance is still evident today in the survival and resilience of indigenous cultures across the Americas. The dawn of English colonization. By the early 17th century, England began to establish permanent colonies in North America. The first successful English settlement was Jamestown, founded in 1607 in present-day Virginia. The settlers, motivated by the promise of wealth and land, faced numerous challenges, including disease, starvation, and conflict with the local Powhatan Confederacy. However, the cultivation of tobacco as a cash crop eventually ensured the colony's survival and economic success. The establishment of Jamestown marked the beginning of a new era in American history, one characterized by the expansion of European colonies, the displacement of indigenous peoples, and the transatlantic slave trade. These developments would shape the course of American history for centuries to come. In conclusion, the first part of America's history is a story of diverse indigenous civilizations and the transformative impact of European exploration and colonization. The arrival of Europeans brought profound changes to the Americas, setting the stage for the complex and often tragic history that would follow. As we move into the next part of this history, we will explore the growth of European colonies, the rise of the transatlantic slave trade, and the path to the American Revolution. The second chapter of American history begins with the establishment of permanent European colonies in North America and traces the development of these colonies over nearly 170 years. This period was marked by the growth of colonial societies, the expansion of European empires, and the increasing tensions between the colonies and their mother countries. By the mid-18th century, these tensions would culminate in the American Revolution, a transformative event that gave birth to the United States of America. The growth of colonial America. Following the founding of Jamestown in 1607, English colonization in North America expanded rapidly. The motivations for colonization varied, including economic opportunities, religious freedom, and the desire to escape political turmoil in Europe. Over time, three distinct regions emerged: the New England colonies, the Middle colonies, and the Southern colonies. Each region developed its own unique social, economic, and political characteristics. The New England colonies. The New England colonies, including Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and New Hampshire, were primarily settled by Puritans seeking religious freedom. The Puritans, a group of English Protestants, believed the Church of England was too corrupt and sought to create a city upon a hill in the New World, a model society based on their religious ideals. The Massachusetts Bay Colony, founded in 1630, became the center of Puritan life. The colony's government was closely tied to the church, and strict religious laws governed daily life. However, dissenters such as Roger Williams and Anne Hutchinson challenged Puritan orthodoxy, leading to the founding of Rhode Island as a haven for religious tolerance. Economically, New England relied on fishing, shipbuilding, and trade. The region's rocky soil made large-scale agriculture difficult, so small family farms and subsistence farming were common. The New England colonies also played a key role in the transatlantic trade network, exporting goods such as fish, timber, and rum. The Middle Colonies. The Middle Colonies, including New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware, were characterized by their ethnic and religious diversity. These colonies attracted settlers from various European countries, including the Dutch, Swedes, Germans, and Scots-Irish. Pennsylvania, founded by William Penn in 1681, became a refuge for Quakers and other religious minorities. The Middle Colonies were known as the breadbasket of the colonies due to their fertile soil and abundant grain production. They also developed thriving trade and commerce, with cities like Philadelphia and New York becoming major economic hubs. The region's diversity and tolerance fostered a spirit of innovation and cultural exchange. The Southern Colonies. The Southern colonies, including Virginia, Maryland, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia, were dominated by agriculture. The warm climate and fertile soil made the region ideal for growing cash crops such as tobacco, rice, and indigo. These crops were labor-intensive, leading to the development of plantation economies reliant on enslaved African labor. Virginia, the first successful English colony, became wealthy through tobacco cultivation. Maryland, founded as a refuge for English Catholics, also relied on tobacco. The Carolinas and Georgia were established later, with rice and indigo becoming major crops in the Low Country. The reliance on enslaved labor in the South created a stark social hierarchy, with wealthy plantation owners at the top and enslaved Africans at the bottom. The transatlantic slave trade. The growth of the southern colonies was education and literacy were highly valued in the New England colonies, where Puritans established schools to ensure that children could read the Bible. Harvard College, founded in 1636, was the first institution of higher learning in the colonies. In contrast, education in the southern colonies was often limited to the wealthy elite, who hired private tutors for their children. Religion played a central role in colonial life. While the New England colonies were dominated by Puritanism, other regions were more religiously diverse. The Great Awakening, a religious revival movement in the 1730s and 1740s, swept through the colonies, emphasizing personal faith and challenging established religious authorities. Colonial culture was also influenced by Enlightenment ideas, which emphasized reason, science, and individual rights. Thinkers such as John Locke and Montesquieu inspired colonial leaders to question traditional authority and advocate for political reform. Tensions with Britain. By the mid-18th century, the American colonies had grown increasingly prosperous and self-sufficient. However, their relationship with Britain began to deteriorate as the British government sought to tighten control over its colonies and extract more revenue from them. The French and Indian War, 1754 to 1763, part of the larger global conflict known as the 7 Years' War, marked a turning point in colonial British relations. The war, fought between Britain and France over territorial claims in North America, ended with British victory. However, the war left Britain deeply in debt, leading to new taxes and policies that angered the colonists. The Proclamation of 1763, which prohibited colonial settlement west of the Appalachian Mountains, was one of the first sources of tension. This was followed by a series of taxes, including the Sugar Act, 1764, the Stamp Act, 1765, and the Townshend Acts, 1767. Colonists argued that these measures violated their rights as British subjects, as they had no representation in Parliament. The rallying cry of "no taxation without representation" became a central theme of colonial resistance. The road to revolution. Colonial opposition to British policies grew throughout the 1760s and 1770s. Protests, boycotts, and acts of civil disobedience became common. Organizations such as the Sons of Liberty and the Daughters of Liberty played key roles in mobilizing resistance. The Boston Massacre in 1770, in which British soldiers killed 5 colonists during a confrontation, further inflamed tensions. The Boston Tea Party of 1773, a protest against the Tea Act, led to harsh British reprisals, including the Intolerable Acts, 1774, which closed Boston Harbor and restricted self-government in Massachusetts. In response, the colonies began to unite. The First Continental Congress met in 1774 to coordinate resistance and assert colonial rights. By 1775, armed conflict had broken out at Lexington and Concord, marking the beginning of the American Revolutionary War. The period from 1607 to 1776 was one of profound transformation in colonial America. The colonies grew from small, struggling settlements into thriving societies with distinct identities and economies. However, the growing tensions with Britain set the stage for a revolutionary struggle that would redefine the relationship between the colonies and the mother country. In the next part of this history, we will explore the American Revolution, the founding of the United States, and the challenges of building a new nation. The third and final part of this early American history series covers the American Revolution, the founding of the United States, and the creation of a new government under the Constitution. This period was marked by a dramatic struggle for independence, the forging of a national identity, and the establishment of a framework for democracy that would shape the nation's future. The American Revolution, 1775 to 1783. The American Revolution was a watershed moment in world history, as 13 British colonies in North America fought for and won their independence. The conflict was not only a military struggle, but also a battle of ideas, centered on principles of liberty, self-government, and human rights. The outbreak of war. The Revolutionary War began in April 1775 with the battles of Lexington and Concord in Massachusetts. Colonial militias known as Minutemen clashed with British troops, signaling the start of open rebellion. The Second Continental Congress, which convened in May 1775, took on the role of coordinating the war effort and appointed George Washington as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army. The early years of the war were challenging for the colonists. The British Army, the most powerful in the world, had superior resources and training. However, the colonists had the advantage of fighting on their home turf, with local support and knowledge of the terrain. They also had a cause that inspired widespread commitment and sacrifice. The Declaration of Independence. On July 4, 1776, the Continental Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence, drafted primarily by Thomas. Please subscribe my channel for more videos.